They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But mine was served with a side of corporate espionage and a $5 price tag that would make a Fortune 500 company weep. My name is Sarah Martinez, and this is the story of how I turned my termination letter into the most expensive piece of paper my former employer ever ignored. The irony wasn't lost on me as I sat in my Honda Civic outside Meridian Dynamics' gleaming headquarters, watching my former colleagues file into the building like ants marching toward their corporate demise. 6 months ago, I was one of them. Senior financial analyst, corner cubicle with a view of the parking lot, and foolishly believing that hard work and integrity meant something in the modern workplace. How naive I was. It started on a Tuesday morning in March when I discovered the discrepancy. Not the small, easily overlooked kind that gets buried in quarterly reports, but the massive, company-threatening kind that keeps CFOs awake at night. Hidden in the labyrinthine spreadsheets of Project Hercules, Meridian's flagship software development initiative was a budgeting error so catastrophic it would have bankrupted the company within 18 months. The numbers didn't lie, even when I desperately wanted them to. Someone had miscalculated the server infrastructure costs by a factor of 10, allocating $400,000 where $4 million was needed. The project was hemorrhaging money faster than a punctured oil tanker, and nobody in senior management had noticed because the reports were being filtered through so many departments that the raw data never reached anyone with half a brain. I spent 3 sleepless nights triple-checking my calculations, running scenarios, and building presentations that would make even the most numbers-phobic executive understand the gravity of the situation. The potential savings from correcting this error would be exactly $4.2 million over the next 2 years. Not million with an M, but million with the kind of M that buys executive bonuses and prevents mass layoffs. The presentation I crafted was a masterpiece of clarity and urgency. 47 slides of irrefutable evidence, complete with charts, graphs, and projections that painted a clear picture. Fix this now, or watch the company crumble. I even included 3 different correction strategies, each with detailed implementation timelines and risk assessments. My direct supervisor, Michael Patterson, was a middle-aged man whose greatest achievement was surviving 15 years at Meridian without making any significant contributions. He had the personality of lukewarm coffee and the decision-making skills of a magic 8-ball. When I scheduled an emergency meeting to present my findings, he spent more time adjusting his tie than listening to my explanation. "Sarah, I appreciate your thoroughness," he said, his voice carrying the condescending tone of someone who had never discovered anything more significant than a new lunch spot. "But this seems like something that would have been caught by our senior team if it were really an issue." "Michael, the numbers are right here," I insisted, pointing to the projected losses on my laptop screen. "If we don't act immediately, we're looking at a potential bankruptcy scenario by next December." He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. "I think you might be overstating things. Why don't you run this by Jennifer in project management? She's been overseeing Hercules from the beginning." Jennifer Walsh was everything I aspired not to become in corporate America. She had climbed the ladder through strategic incompetence, shifting blame with the skill of a professional magician and taking credit for successes she had nothing to do with. Her office was decorated with motivational posters about teamwork and excellence, which was particularly ironic given her tendency to throw subordinates under the bus whenever convenient. When I presented my findings to Jennifer, she didn't even pretend to pay attention. She spent the entire meeting responding to emails on her phone, occasionally making non-committal humming sounds that I generously interpreted as acknowledgement. "This is interesting work. Sarah," she finally said, not looking up from her screen, "but I think you might be misunderstanding the scope of Project Hercules. These numbers have been reviewed by multiple departments." "That's exactly the problem," I explained, my patience wearing thin. "The numbers have been reviewed by people who don't understand the technical requirements. The infrastructure costs alone will exceed the current budget by 300%. Jennifer finally looked at me, her expression suggesting I had just explained quantum physics to a goldfish. "I'll take this under advisement and discuss it with the senior team." 3 weeks passed without a word. Project Hercules continued burning through its budget like a teenager with a credit card. while I watched the financial hemorrhaging from my cubicle with growing desperation. Every day of inaction was costing the company thousands of dollars. And every night I went home knowing I had the solution to a problem that could destroy hundreds of jobs. I decided to bypass the chain of command. The email I sent to CEO Richard Blackwood was concise, professional, and accompanied by a condensed version of my presentation. I outlined the situation, provided the key financial data, and respectfully requested an opportunity to present my findings to the executive team. I copied my direct supervisor and Jennifer Walsh, following proper protocol while making it clear that urgent action was needed. Richard Blackwood's response arrived within 6 hours, which should have been encouraging. Instead, it was a forwarded message to HR with a note that made my blood run cold. Please address this employee's inappropriate circumvention of management structure and apparent dissemination of confidential project information. The meeting with HR happened the next morning. Janet Morrison from Human Resources was a thin woman with glasses that seemed too large for her face and a smile that never reached her eyes. She had perfected the art of corporate speak, using phrases like moving forward and best practices to avoid saying anything of substance. Sarah, we need to discuss your recent communication with senior leadership, she began, consulting a folder that presumably contained documentation of my professional execution. Going around your immediate supervisors is not in line with company policy. I was trying to prevent a financial disaster, I protested. The information I provided could save the company millions of dollars. Janet's expression remained neutral, but I caught a flicker of something, impatience, perhaps, or the kind of exhaustion that comes from dealing with employees who refuse to accept their place in the corporate hierarchy. Your concerns have been noted and will be addressed through proper channels, she said. However, your decision to contact the CEO directly shows a lack of trust in your management team and could be interpreted as insubordination. The formal reprimand was placed in my personnel file, along with a requirement to attend a workshop on effective communication in hierarchical organizations. The irony was suffocating. I was being punished for communicating too effectively about a problem that could bankrupt the company. But the real betrayal came 2 weeks later. I was reviewing quarterly reports when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Project Hercules had been restructured, its budget reallocated across multiple departments in exactly the manner I'd recommended in my original presentation. The infrastructure costs had been corrected, the server allocations adjusted, and the timeline modified to reflect realistic development goals. Someone had implemented my solution. The announcement came through internal email, signed by Jennifer Walsh and copied to the entire company. Thanks to the diligent work of our project management team, we have identified and corrected significant budgetary oversights in Project Hercules, resulting in projected savings of $4.2 million over the next 2 years. $4.2 million, the exact figure from my presentation. Jennifer Walsh was promoted to Vice President of Strategic Planning the following month. Michael Patterson received a commendation for exceptional oversight and financial stewardship. Richard Blackwood sent a company-wide email praising the proactive management approach that prevented potential budget overruns. My name appeared nowhere in any of the communications. The final insult came during my performance review in June. Janet Morrison sat across from me with the same folder, the same neutral expression, and the evaluation that would have been laughable if it weren't so devastating. Sarah, while your analytical skills are adequate, we have concerns about your ability to work within established team structures. She read from what was clearly a prepared statement. Your tendency to escalate issues inappropriately and your apparent difficulty accepting management guidance suggests that you might be better suited for a role with less collaborative requirements. Are you firing me? I asked, though I already knew the answer. We're eliminating your position as part of a departmental restructuring, Janet replied, the corporate euphemism falling from her lips with practiced ease. You'll receive standard severance package and assistance with job placement services. The severance package was 2 weeks' pay and a non-disclosure agreement that would prevent me from discussing any proprietary information about Meridian Dynamics. The NDA was particularly thorough, covering everything from client lists to project details to financial data. It was clearly designed to ensure that I would never be able to prove my role in saving the company $4.2 million. I signed it, took my cardboard box of personal belongings, and walked out of Meridian Dynamics for the last time as an employee. But not for the last time as an enemy. The weeks that followed were a blur of job applications, interviews, and slowly burning through my savings while watching my former colleagues celebrate their success on LinkedIn. Jennifer Walsh posted regularly about her new role, sharing inspirational quotes about leadership and innovation. Michael Patterson changed his profile to highlight his proven track record of identifying and resolving complex financial challenges. It was during one of these masochistic social media sessions that I discovered something interesting. Jennifer had been careless with her privacy settings, and her recent post revealed details about upcoming projects, client negotiations, and strategic initiatives that should have been confidential. That's when I remembered the external hard drive. During my final week at Meridian, while cleaning out my desk and preparing for my departure, I had backed up years of work to ensure I could provide references for future employers. The backup included financial models, project analyses, client databases, strategic planning documents, and market research reports. It was comprehensive, detailed, and completely legal under the terms of my employment contract, which allowed personal backups for professional development purposes. The non-disclosure agreement I'd signed prevented me from sharing this information with competitors or using it to harm Meridian's business interests, but it said nothing about selling it. The idea came to me during a particularly frustrating afternoon of job searching. I was scrolling through freelance websites, looking for temporary work to pay the bills, when I stumbled across a section for business intelligence services. Companies were paying thousands of dollars for market research, competitive analysis, and industry insights. I spent the evening reviewing my backup files, cataloging the information I had accumulated during my years at Meridian. The collection was impressive. Detailed financial projections for the next 5 years, complete client contact databases, proprietary software documentation, strategic planning documents, competitive analysis reports, and internal communications that revealed the company's decision-making processes. This wasn't just data, it was a comprehensive blueprint of how a mid-sized technology company operated, complete with their strengths, weaknesses, and closely guarded business strategies. The legal research took 3 days. I consulted with 2 different attorneys, paying for brief consultations to understand the boundaries of what I could and couldn't do. The non-disclosure agreement was binding, but it had loopholes. I couldn't share specific information about Meridian Dynamics, but I could create anonymized case studies and industry analysis reports based on my experience. The attorneys were clear. As long as I didn't explicitly identify Meridian or provide information that could be directly traced back to them, I was operating within legal boundaries. The data I had collected was my own work product, created during my employment, and the company had no ownership claim over my analytical methods or general industry knowledge. I spent 2 weeks creating the perfect product. The document I assembled was a masterpiece of strategic intelligence, packaged as a comprehensive industry report titled Mid-Market Technology Companies, Internal Operations and Strategic Vulnerabilities Analysis. It was 247 pages of detailed insights, financial models, operational procedures, and strategic recommendations, all based on extensive research and direct industry experience. The report contained everything a competitor would need to understand how companies like Meridian operated: client acquisition strategies, pricing models, project management methodologies, financial planning processes, and detailed breakdowns of operational costs and profit margins. It was a roadmap for either competing against or acquiring companies in Meridian's market segment. But the real genius was in the presentation. Instead of selling it as proprietary information about a specific company, I marketed it as a general industry analysis. The legal distinction was crucial. I wasn't selling Meridian's secrets. I was selling my expertise in analyzing technology companies. The platform I chose was perfect for my purposes. Business Intel Exchange was a marketplace where consultants sold research reports, industry analyses, and strategic insights to companies looking for competitive advantages. The site had thousands of users, including executives from major corporations, investment firms, and consulting companies. I created a professional profile under the name Strategic Analysis Solutions, highlighting my years of experience in financial analysis and technology sector research. The profile was vague enough to protect my identity while establishing credibility with potential buyers. The pricing strategy was where I let my sense of humor shine through. I could have priced the report at its actual value, thousands of dollars for the kind of comprehensive intelligence it contained. Instead, I set the price at exactly $5. $5 for 247 pages of actionable business intelligence. $5 for information that could give competitors a significant advantage over Meridian Dynamics. $5 for the collective knowledge I'd accumulated during years of dedicated work. The product description was simple: comprehensive analysis of mid-market technology company operations, including financial models, strategic planning processes, and operational methodologies. Based on extensive industry research and direct experience, immediate download available. I uploaded the report on a Friday evening and went to bed wondering if anyone would even notice it. By Monday morning, I had 37 purchases. The buyer messages started arriving within hours. Corporate executives, consultants, and business analysts were praising the quality and depth of the analysis. Several buyers asked if I had similar reports for other industry segments. One message came from someone who claimed to be a senior executive at a Fortune 500 company, asking if I would be interested in consulting work. But the message that made me smile came from a username I didn't recognize. Thank you for this incredible resource. The financial projections alone are worth 10 times what I paid. Do you have any information about companies specifically in the enterprise software space? Enterprise software was Meridian's primary market. I checked the sales dashboard compulsively over the next few days, watching the numbers climb. 50 purchases, then 100, then 200, at $5 each. I wasn't getting rich, but I was getting something more valuable than money. I was getting revenge. Each purchase represented someone gaining access to information that could be used to compete against Meridian, poach their clients, or simply understand their weaknesses. The report was spreading through the business intelligence community like a virus, shared and discussed in forums and professional networks. The real impact became clear 3 weeks later. I was browsing industry news when I found the article. Meridian Dynamics loses major client to emerging competitor. The story described how TechFlow Solutions, a smaller company, had successfully bid on a project that Meridian had been expected to win. The winning proposal had demonstrated an unusually sophisticated understanding of Meridian's pricing structure and project management approach. TechFlow's CEO was quoted as saying, "We were able to develop a more competitive proposal by understanding exactly what our client needed and how other companies in our space typically approach these projects." I recognized the language immediately. The CEO was describing insights that came directly from my report. More articles followed over the next month. Market disruption in enterprise software. New competition challenges established players, and industry analysts predict significant changes in mid-market technology sector. Each story contained references to competitive strategies and market insights that had originated from my $5 intelligence report. Meridian Dynamics was being systematically outcompeted by companies that suddenly understood their business better than they understood themselves. The LinkedIn posts from my former colleagues began to change. Jennifer Walsh's inspirational quotes were replaced by articles about navigating challenging market conditions and adapting to increased competition. Michael Patterson's profile updates became less frequent, and when he did post, it was usually about resilience in changing times or overcoming unexpected challenges. I created a fake LinkedIn profile to monitor the situation more closely. Sarah Chen, a recent MBA graduate looking for opportunities in business analysis, connected with several of my former colleagues and watched the slow-motion corporate disaster unfold in real time. The quarterly earnings report released in September was devastating. Meridian Dynamics had missed revenue projections by 18%, lost 3 major clients, and was facing increased competition from emerging market players with sophisticated business models. The stock price dropped by 22% in the 2 days following the announcement. Richard Blackwood's statement to shareholders was a masterpiece of corporate deflection. While we face temporary headwinds in our market segment, our strong fundamentals and proven management team position us well for future growth. I was reading this statement in a coffee shop near my new apartment when I noticed someone familiar at the next table. Janet Morrison from HR was sitting alone, scrolling through her phone with the expression of someone who had just received very bad news. I couldn't resist. "Janet," I said, approaching her table with a friendly smile. "It's Sarah Martinez. We used to work together at Meridian." Her face went through several expressions: surprise, recognition, and something that might have been guilt. "Sarah, hello. How are you doing?" "I'm doing well, thank you. I've been freelancing, doing some consulting work. How are things at Meridian?" Janet's smile was strained. "Oh, the usual challenges. The market has been difficult lately." "I heard about the earnings report," I said, sitting down across from her. "That must be stressful for everyone." "It's been a tough quarter," she admitted. "We're having to make some difficult decisions about staffing and resources." I nodded sympathetically. It's amazing how quickly things can change in business. One day you're on top, the next day you're struggling to compete. "The competition has become much more sophisticated," Janet said, unknowingly echoing the language from my report. "It's like they understand our business better than we do." I had to suppress a laugh. "That does sound challenging. Well, I hope things improve soon." As I walked away from the coffee shop, I felt a satisfaction that had nothing to do with money or professional success. For the first time since being fired, I felt like the universe had restored some balance. But my revenge was far from complete. The second phase began when I received a message through the Business Intel Exchange platform. The sender identified himself as Marcus Chen, a partner at Redstone Investment Group, and he was interested in purchasing more detailed information about specific companies in the technology sector. "Your industry analysis report was exceptional," he wrote. "We're particularly interested in companies that might be acquisition targets due to operational inefficiencies or market vulnerabilities. Would you be willing to create a custom report?" I researched Redstone Investment Group thoroughly before responding. They were a private equity firm specializing in technology acquisitions, with a particular focus on distressed companies that could be purchased below market value and restructured for profit. Their typical strategy involved identifying companies with strong underlying assets but poor management or operational problems. In other words, they were exactly the kind of firm that would be interested in a company like Meridian Dynamics. My response to Marcus was professional and carefully worded. "I'd be happy to discuss a custom analysis project. I have extensive experience analyzing mid-market technology companies and can provide detailed insights into operational efficiency, market positioning, and strategic vulnerabilities." The consulting contract we negotiated was legitimate and lucrative. Redstone was willing to pay $15,000 for a comprehensive analysis of potential acquisition targets in the enterprise software market, with a focus on companies that might be undervalued due to recent market challenges. I spent 3 weeks creating a report that was a work of art. The document focused on 3 companies that fit Redstone's acquisition criteria. The analysis was thorough, professional, and devastating in its accuracy. I examined financial performance, operational efficiency, market positioning, management effectiveness, and strategic vulnerabilities for each target company. One of the 3 companies I analyzed was identified only as Company B in the report. Company B was described as a mid-sized enterprise software developer with strong technical capabilities, but significant management and operational challenges. The analysis detailed a pattern of poor strategic decision-making, ineffective leadership, and competitive vulnerabilities that made it an ideal acquisition target. The financial projections for Company B were particularly interesting. I demonstrated how the company's current market value was artificially depressed due to recent performance issues, but that its underlying assets and client base were worth significantly more than the current stock price suggested. A properly executed acquisition could result in a return on investment of over 300% within 2 years. I also provided a detailed acquisition strategy. outlining exactly how an acquiring company could approach the target, what price points would be attractive, and how the integration process should be managed to maximize value. The report never explicitly identified Company B as Meridian Dynamics, but anyone who cared to cross-reference the financial data, market position, and operational details would reach that conclusion within minutes. Marcus Chen's response was enthusiastic. This analysis exceeds our expectations. The detail and insight you've provided will be invaluable for our investment decisions. We'd like to engage your services on a retainer basis for ongoing market intelligence. I politely declined the retainer offer, but agreed to provide additional reports on a project basis. I wanted to maintain my distance from whatever Redstone decided to do with the information I had provided. The news broke 6 weeks later. Private equity firm announces acquisition interest in Meridian Dynamics was the headline that appeared in the business section of the local newspaper. The article described how Redstone Investment Group had filed preliminary paperwork indicating their interest in acquiring Meridian, citing the company's strong underlying value proposition and potential for operational improvement under experienced management. The stock market's reaction was immediate and brutal. Meridian's share price dropped by 31% in a single day as investors interpreted the acquisition interest as confirmation that the company was in serious trouble. The business press began speculating about management changes, layoffs, and potential asset sales. Richard Blackwood's emergency statement to shareholders was a masterpiece of corporate panic. While we are aware of market speculation regarding acquisition activity, Meridian Dynamics remains committed to independent operation and continued growth. Our board of directors will carefully evaluate any formal proposals in the best interests of our shareholders. The language was defensive and desperate. Exactly what you'd expect from a CEO who had just realized his company was being stalked by corporate predators. I followed the story obsessively over the next month, watching as Meridian's stock price continued to decline and industry analysts began dissecting the company's vulnerabilities in excruciating detail. The business press was particularly focused on the company's recent competitive struggles and management effectiveness issues. One article in particular caught my attention: how mid-market technology companies become acquisition targets. The piece used Meridian as a case study, analyzing exactly how operational inefficiencies and strategic missteps could make a company vulnerable to hostile takeovers. The article's author had clearly done extensive research, citing specific examples of poor financial planning, ineffective management decisions, and competitive disadvantages that made Meridian an attractive target for private equity firms. The level of detail was impressive, and I recognized several insights that had originated from my intelligence reports. Meridian Dynamics was being publicly dissected by analysts who understood their business better than their own executives did. The third phase of my revenge began when I received an unexpected email from someone identifying himself as David Kim, a senior associate at Brightwater Consulting Group. He had found my contact information through the business intelligence platform and was interested in discussing a potential opportunity. "We've been following your work in technology sector analysis," he wrote. "Our firm specializes in helping companies navigate competitive challenges and operational improvements. We have a client who could benefit from your expertise in enterprise software market dynamics." I was intrigued but cautious. Brightwater Consulting Group had an excellent reputation in the industry, specializing in corporate turnaround and strategic restructuring. They were the kind of firm that companies hired when they were in serious trouble and needed outside expertise to survive. The initial conversation with David Kim was enlightening. Brightwater had been retained by a technology company that was facing increased competition and needed help understanding how their competitors were gaining market advantages. The client wanted to understand what information might be available to competitors and how to protect their strategic assets. "Our client has been experiencing some unusual competitive pressure," David explained during our phone call. "Their competitors seem to have developed sophisticated strategies that target their specific vulnerabilities. We're trying to understand how this kind of intelligence might be gathered and disseminated." I recognized the situation immediately. Brightwater had been hired by Meridian Dynamics to investigate how their competitors had gained such detailed knowledge of their business operations. The irony was delicious. Meridian had hired consultants to investigate the source of intelligence leaks that were undermining their competitive position. And those consultants were now asking me, the source of those leaks, to help them understand the problem. I agreed to a consulting engagement with Brightwater, carefully structuring the arrangement to avoid any conflicts of interest or ethical violations. My role would be to provide general education about business intelligence gathering and market research methods, without reference to any specific companies or situations. The retainer agreement was for $25,000 paid by Brightwater on behalf of their unnamed client for a comprehensive analysis of competitive intelligence vulnerabilities in the technology sector. I spent 2 weeks creating a report that was simultaneously helpful and devastating. The document provided a thorough education about how companies could protect themselves from competitive intelligence gathering. But it also demonstrated exactly how vulnerable most companies were to these techniques. The report explained how former employees, publicly available information, social media carelessness, and inadequate information security could be combined to create detailed profiles of company operations. I provided case studies showing how competitors could use job postings, patent filings, press releases, and employee LinkedIn profiles to reconstruct strategic plans and operational procedures. Most importantly, I demonstrated how companies could inadvertently provide competitors with detailed intelligence through their own communications and business practices. The section on internal communications security was particularly comprehensive, showing how information shared in meetings, emails, and presentations could be used to understand decision-making processes and strategic priorities. The report concluded with recommendations for protecting against competitive intelligence gathering. But these recommendations also served as a roadmap for anyone interested in gathering such intelligence. I delivered the report to David Kim with a cover letter expressing my appreciation for the opportunity to work with Brightwater. I also mentioned that I would be interested in additional projects related to competitive analysis and market intelligence. David's response was professionally enthusiastic. Your analysis provides exactly the kind of insight our client needs to understand their competitive environment. We'll be presenting your findings to senior management and will likely have follow-up questions. I never heard from Brightwater again, but I didn't need to. The local business press provided regular updates on Meridian's ongoing struggles with competitive pressure and strategic challenges. The final phase of my revenge was the most subtle and perhaps the most satisfying. By December, Meridian Dynamics was fighting for survival. The combination of competitive pressure, acquisition threats, and management instability had created a perfect storm of corporate crisis. The stock price had fallen by 60% from its peak. 3 board members had resigned, and industry analysts were openly speculating about bankruptcy or forced sale. That's when I decided to apply for a job. The position was Senior Strategic Analyst, a newly created role focused on competitive intelligence and market analysis. According to the job description, Meridian was looking for someone with extensive experience in technology sector analysis and proven ability to understand competitive dynamics and market trends. The qualifications were so specific they might as well have included my name. Ideal candidate will have 5 to 7 years of experience in financial analysis, demonstrated expertise in enterprise software markets, and proven track record of identifying strategic opportunities and threats. I submitted my application using my real name and actual employment history. The resume was accurate and comprehensive, highlighting my years of experience at Meridian Dynamics and my recent success as an independent consultant specializing in technology sector analysis. The cover letter was a masterpiece of professional audacity. I am writing to express my interest in the senior strategic analyst position at Meridian Dynamics. Having worked extensively in technology sector analysis, I have developed comprehensive expertise in understanding competitive dynamics and market intelligence. I believe my unique perspective on the challenges facing mid-market technology companies would be valuable to your strategic planning efforts. The response came within 2 days. Jennifer Walsh, now Vice President of Strategic Planning, wanted to schedule an interview. I prepared for the interview with the same thoroughness I had brought to my original analysis of Project Hercules. I researched Meridian's current challenges, analyzed their competitive position, and developed recommendations for addressing their strategic vulnerabilities. The irony was perfect. I was preparing to interview for a job that involved solving problems I had created. The interview was scheduled for a Thursday morning in January, exactly 10 months after I had been fired for trying to save the company $4.2 million. I arrived at Meridian Dynamics 15 minutes early, wearing my best interview suit and carrying a portfolio of analysis samples that demonstrated my expertise in competitive intelligence and market research. The samples were carefully selected to showcase my analytical skills without revealing my role in the company's recent difficulties. The lobby had been renovated since my departure, but the atmosphere was unmistakably different. The energy that had once characterized the building was gone, replaced by the quiet desperation of a company fighting for survival. Jennifer Walsh looked older and more tired than I remembered. The confident executive who had dismissed my concerns about Project Hercules had been replaced by someone who clearly understood that her career was hanging by a thread. "Sarah," she said, shaking my hand with professional warmth, "thank you for coming in. I have to say, when I saw your application, I was surprised. I didn't realize you had developed such extensive expertise in competitive analysis." "The consulting work has been very educational," I replied. "I've had the opportunity to work with several companies facing similar challenges to what Meridian is experiencing." The interview lasted 90 minutes and covered everything from market analysis techniques to competitive intelligence gathering to strategic planning methodologies. Jennifer asked detailed questions about my approach to understanding competitor strategies and identifying market opportunities. I answered each question with professional competence and subtle hints about my understanding of Meridian's specific situation. When she asked about my experience with companies facing acquisition pressure, I provided a comprehensive analysis of how private equity firms evaluate potential targets and what strategies companies could use to protect themselves. "It's interesting that you mentioned that," Jennifer said, making notes on her legal pad. "We've been dealing with some acquisition interest lately, and it's been challenging to understand how potential acquirers are evaluating our position." "That's a common challenge," I replied. "Companies often underestimate how much information about their operations is available to competitors and potential acquirers. Sometimes the intelligence that seems most damaging comes from sources that companies don't even realize exist." Jennifer's expression suggested she was beginning to understand the implications of what I was saying. The technical portion of the interview involved analyzing a case study that Jennifer presented as a hypothetical scenario. The case study described a technology company facing competitive pressure from firms that seemed to understand their business unusually well. I recognized the case study immediately. It was a barely disguised description of Meridian's own situation. My analysis was thorough and devastating. I explained exactly how competitors might have gained intelligence about the company's operations, what vulnerabilities they were likely exploiting, and what strategies the company could use to protect itself going forward. "The key issue," I concluded, "is that this company has been operating under the assumption that their strategic information was secure, when in reality, they've been inadvertently sharing intelligence with competitors through multiple channels." Jennifer was taking notes furiously. "What would you recommend as the first step for addressing this situation?" "The company needs to conduct a comprehensive audit of their information security practices," I said. "They should assume that competitors have access to detailed intelligence about their operations and plan accordingly." The interview concluded with Jennifer asking about my salary expectations and availability. I provided a reasonable range and indicated that I could start immediately if offered the position. "I have to say, Sarah, your analysis of our competitive situation is remarkably insightful," Jennifer said as she walked me to the lobby. "We'll be making a decision within the next week." I thanked her for the opportunity and left the building with a sense of completion that had nothing to do with whether I would be offered the job. The call came 3 days later. "Sarah, this is Jennifer Walsh. I'm pleased to offer you the position of Senior Strategic Analyst at Meridian Dynamics. We were impressed by your expertise and believe you can make a significant contribution to our strategic planning efforts." I accepted the offer with professional enthusiasm, negotiating a salary that was 30% higher than what I had been earning when I was fired. The start date was set for the following Monday. The weekend before my return to Meridian Dynamics, I spent time reflecting on the journey that had brought me full circle. 10 months earlier, I had been fired for identifying a problem that could have saved the company millions of dollars. Now I was being hired to solve problems that I had created by sharing the intelligence I had gathered during my years of dedicated service. The irony was so perfect it felt like justice. My first day back at Meridian Dynamics was surreal. The same security guard who had watched me carry my cardboard box to the parking lot 10 months earlier now welcomed me back with a temporary ID badge and directions to my new office. The office was significantly better than my old cubicle, a corner space with actual windows and enough room for a proper desk and meeting table. The nameplate on the door read, Sarah Martinez, Senior Strategic Analyst. Jennifer Walsh introduced me to the team during the morning meeting, describing me as an expert in competitive intelligence and market analysis who will be leading our efforts to understand and respond to the competitive challenges we've been facing. My new colleagues were friendly and professional, clearly hoping that I would have solutions to problems that had been plaguing the company for months. Several people mentioned that they had heard about my reputation in the industry and were excited to work with someone who understood the competitive landscape so well. The briefing materials Jennifer provided were comprehensive and devastating. Meridian had lost 7 major clients in the past 6 months, all to competitors who had submitted proposals that demonstrated unusually sophisticated understanding of Meridian's pricing, capabilities, and strategic approach. The competitive analysis section was particularly interesting. It detailed how several smaller companies had suddenly become formidable competitors, using strategies and capabilities that seemed far beyond what their size and resources should have allowed. It's like they're reading our playbook. One of my new colleagues commented during the team meeting, they know exactly what we're going to propose and how to counter it. I spent my first week conducting interviews with employees across different departments, gathering information about competitive encounters and strategic challenges. The picture that emerged was exactly what I expected. A company that had been systematically outmaneuvered by competitors who understood their business better than they understood themselves. The solution I proposed was comprehensive and expensive. Meridian needed to completely overhaul their competitive intelligence capabilities, implement new information security protocols, and restructure their strategic planning processes to prevent further intelligence leaks. The presentation I delivered to senior management 3 weeks after my return was a masterpiece of strategic analysis. I demonstrated exactly how competitors had gained advantages over Meridian, what information they were likely using, and what steps the company needed to take to protect itself going forward. The fundamental issue, I explained to the assembled executives, is that Meridian has been operating in a market where competitors have access to detailed intelligence about your operations, while you have been operating blind to their capabilities and strategies. Richard Blackwood leaned forward in his chair, his expression grave. What kind of intelligence are you talking about? I clicked to the next slide, which showed a detailed breakdown of information that competitors could potentially access. Financial projections, client databases, project management methodologies, pricing strategies, operational procedures, and strategic planning documents. The kind of comprehensive intelligence that would allow competitors to anticipate your moves and counter them effectively. The room was silent as the implications sank in. These executives were realizing that their company had been fighting a war while their enemies had access to their battle plans. How would competitors gain access to this kind of information? Jennifer asked, though her tone suggested she was beginning to suspect the answer. There are multiple potential sources, I replied, advancing to a slide that outlined various intelligence gathering methods. Former employees with access to proprietary information, inadequate information security protocols, social media disclosures, and public records analysis. Companies often underestimate how much intelligence can be reconstructed from seemingly innocuous sources. Michael Patterson, who had been quietly taking notes, looked up with a troubled expression. Are you suggesting that we have a security breach? I'm suggesting that you have multiple security vulnerabilities that could be exploited by competitors with sufficient motivation and resources. I answered diplomatically. The question isn't whether these vulnerabilities exist, it's whether they're being exploited. The strategic recommendations I presented were extensive and would require significant investment, new cybersecurity protocols, employee training programs, information classification systems, and competitive intelligence capabilities would cost the company over $2 million to implement properly. But the alternative, I explained, was continued competitive disadvantage and potential corporate failure. The companies that are outcompeting you aren't necessarily better at what they do. I concluded, they're better at understanding what you do. Until you address that intelligence gap, you'll continue losing market share to competitors who can anticipate your strategies. The presentation was approved unanimously, and I was given authorization to begin implementing the recommended changes immediately. Over the following months, I threw myself into the work with an enthusiasm that surprised even me. The irony of being paid to solve problems I had created was intellectually satisfying, but the actual work of rebuilding Meridian's competitive capabilities was genuinely engaging. I developed new protocols for handling sensitive information, created training programs to educate employees about competitive intelligence risks, and established monitoring systems to detect potential security breaches. The work was comprehensive, complex, and exactly the kind of strategic challenge I had always enjoyed. But the most satisfying part was watching my former colleagues slowly realize what had happened to their company. The breakthrough came during a team meeting in April, 4 months after my return. I was presenting an analysis of competitive intelligence techniques when Jennifer asked a question that had clearly been bothering her. "Sarah, you seem to have an unusually detailed understanding of how competitors might gather intelligence about our operations. Your insights are remarkably specific." The room went quiet. Everyone was looking at me, and I could see the wheels turning in their minds as they began to connect the dots. My consulting work exposed me to various competitive intelligence gathering methods. I replied calmly, "I've seen how companies can be vulnerable to these techniques, and I've learned to recognize the signs when they're being exploited." "What kind of consulting work?" Michael asked, his voice carrying a new edge of suspicion. "Business intelligence analysis," I said. "I specialized in helping companies understand competitive dynamics and market trends." Jennifer's expression had changed. The professional warmth was gone, replaced by the calculating look of someone who was beginning to understand they had been outsmarted. "Sarah," she said carefully, "when you were consulting, did you ever work on projects that involved analyzing companies in our market segment?" The moment had arrived. After months of careful maneuvering, we had reached the point where the truth could no longer be avoided. "Yes," I said simply. I provided competitive analysis services to various clients interested in understanding how mid-market technology companies operate. The silence that followed was profound. I could see the realization spreading across their faces as they understood the implications of what I had just admitted. Richard Blackwood was the first to speak. "Are you saying that you've been selling intelligence about our company to competitors?" "I'm saying that I've been providing market analysis services based on my expertise in the technology sector," I replied. "The information I've shared has been properly anonymized and presented as general industry analysis." "But it was based on your knowledge of our operations," Jennifer said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "It was based on my years of experience working in this industry," I corrected. "The same experience that qualified me for this position." The legal implications were immediately apparent to everyone in the room. They suspected what I had done, but proving it would be nearly impossible. The non-disclosure agreement I had signed when I was fired prevented me from sharing specific information about Meridian, but it didn't prevent me from using my general industry knowledge for legitimate consulting purposes. Michael Patterson was furiously taking notes, probably calculating potential legal strategies. "Sarah, did you share any proprietary information about Meridian dynamics with competitors or consulting clients?" "I have strictly adhered to all confidentiality agreements and legal obligations," I replied. "I have never shared proprietary information about any specific company." It was technically true. I had never explicitly identified Meridian in any of my reports or consulting work. The information I had shared was presented as anonymized case studies and general industry analysis. But everyone in the room understood that technical legal compliance and ethical behavior were two different things. Richard Blackwood's face was red with barely contained rage. "You destroyed our company." I provided legitimate consulting services based on my professional expertise. I replied. If those services inadvertently impacted Meridian's competitive position, that's an unfortunate coincidence. The meeting ended with uncomfortable silence and meaningful glances between the executives. I knew that my time at Meridian was coming to an end, but I had accomplished what I came to do. Over the next week, I completed the implementation of the new competitive intelligence protocols I had designed. The systems I put in place would protect Meridian from the kind of intelligence gathering that had damaged them so severely. But the protection was coming too late to save the company from the consequences of their earlier vulnerabilities. The conversation with Jennifer Walsh came the following Friday. She called me into her office with the same professional demeanor she had maintained since the revelation of my consulting work. "Sarah, we need to discuss your future with the company," she began. "I assume you're terminating my employment," I replied. "We're restructuring the strategic analysis function," she said, using the same euphemistic language that had been used when I was fired the first time. "Your position is being eliminated as part of this reorganization." "I understand," I said. "What are the terms of my departure?" The severance package was generous: 3 months' salary and benefits, along with a mutual non-disclosure agreement that would prevent either party from discussing the circumstances of my departure. The company clearly wanted to avoid any legal complications that might arise from our unusual situation. I signed the paperwork without objection and cleared out my office that same afternoon. The nameplate reading Sarah Martinez, Senior Strategic Analyst, went into my desk drawer, along with the few personal items I'd accumulated during my brief return to corporate life. As I walked through the lobby for the final time, I reflected on the elegant completeness of my revenge. I had been fired for trying to save Meridian Dynamics $4.2 million. In response, I had cost them significantly more than that in lost business, competitive disadvantage, and recovery expenses. More importantly, I had demonstrated that intelligence, determination, and careful planning could overcome corporate injustice. The executives who had stolen credit for my work and fired me for their own incompetence had been forced to confront the consequences of their actions. The final chapter of my story came 6 months later. I was reading the business section of the newspaper over coffee when I saw the headline, "Meridian Dynamics acquired by Redstone Investment Group." The article described how the private equity firm had successfully completed its acquisition of the struggling technology company for significantly less than the company's previous market value. Richard Blackwood had been replaced as CEO, and most of the senior management team had been restructured out of their positions. Jennifer Walsh was not mentioned in the article, and a quick LinkedIn search revealed that her profile had been updated to show she was exploring new opportunities in strategic planning and business development. Michael Patterson's profile indicated that he was now working as a senior analyst at a small accounting firm, a significant step down from his previous role at Meridian. The acquisition had been completed at exactly the valuation I'd projected in my analysis for Redstone Investment Group. The private equity firm had used the intelligence I provided to structure a deal that gave them control of Meridian's assets and client base at a fraction of what the company had been worth before my intervention. I had successfully orchestrated the corporate equivalent of a perfect crime. Every action I had taken was legal, every document I had created was legitimate, and every consulting engagement I had completed was ethically defensible. Yet the cumulative effect had been the complete destruction of the company that had wronged me. The poetic justice was overwhelming. Meridian Dynamics had fired me for identifying a problem that could have saved them millions of dollars. In response, I had created problems that cost them their independence, their leadership, and ultimately, their existence as an independent company. My phone rang as I was finishing the newspaper article. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the voice was familiar. "Sarah, this is Marcus Chen from Redstone Investment Group. I hope you remember our previous consulting relationship." "Of course," I replied. "Congratulations on your recent acquisition." "Thank you. The intelligence you provided was instrumental in our evaluation process. We're now looking at restructuring operations and would be interested in engaging your services again." The irony was delicious. Redstone wanted to hire me to help them restructure the company I'd helped them acquire by providing intelligence that had made the acquisition possible in the first place. I appreciate the offer, I said, but I'm not available for that kind of consulting work at the moment. We'd be willing to offer very competitive compensation. Marcus pressed, your insights into this particular company's operations would be invaluable. I'm sure they would be, I replied, but I think it's time for me to move on to other projects. After hanging up, I sat back in my chair and contemplated the completeness of my victory. I had started with nothing but a termination letter and a sense of injustice. Through careful planning, strategic thinking, and patient execution, I had transformed that injustice into perfect revenge. The executives who had stolen credit for my work had lost their careers. The company that had fired me for competence had been acquired by corporate raiders. The colleagues who had watched my mistreatment without protest had been scattered to lesser positions throughout the industry. Justice had been served, one $5 intelligence report at a time. The epilogue to my story came a year later, when I received an unexpected email from someone I hadn't heard from in months. Janet Morrison, the HR manager who had orchestrated my original termination, was reaching out with what she described as a professional opportunity. Dear Sarah, the email read, I hope this message finds you well. I'm currently working with a consulting firm that specializes in competitive intelligence and strategic analysis. Given your reputation in the industry, I wanted to reach out about a potential opportunity that might interest you. The consulting firm Janet had joined was apparently struggling to compete with more established competitors and needed someone with expertise in business intelligence gathering and analysis. The position would involve exactly the kind of work I'd been doing as an independent consultant. I remember your analytical skills from our time at Meridian, Janet wrote, and I think you would be an excellent fit for this role. The compensation package is very attractive, and you would have significant autonomy in developing our competitive intelligence capabilities. I stared at the email for several minutes, appreciating the final irony of my revenge story. The HR manager who had facilitated my termination was now trying to hire me to do the same kind of work that had destroyed her previous employer. My response was brief and professional. Thank you for thinking of me, Janet. However, I'm not interested in pursuing opportunities in competitive intelligence consulting at this time. I wish you success in your new role. I never heard from Janet Morrison again, but I occasionally checked her LinkedIn profile to monitor her progress. The consulting firm she had joined struggled for several months before being acquired by a larger competitor. Janet's profile eventually showed that she had moved to a smaller company in a different industry, apparently having decided that the technology sector was too competitive for her tastes. The final satisfaction came from knowing that my former colleagues had learned, too late, the value of treating competent employees with respect and recognizing their contributions. The corporate culture that had enabled my mistreatment had been thoroughly destroyed, and the people responsible had paid the price for their arrogance and incompetence. 2 years after being fired for saving Meridian Dynamics $4.2 million, I had successfully orchestrated the complete destruction of the company and the careers of everyone who had wronged me. The cost to them had been exponentially greater than the value of the work they had stolen from me. The best part was that they all knew exactly what had happened, but could never prove it or take legal action against me. I had operated entirely within the boundaries of law and ethics, using nothing but public information, legitimate consulting practices, and the natural consequences of their own poor decision-making. My revenge had been perfect, legal, profitable, and absolutely devastating. As I closed the newspaper and finished my coffee, I reflected on the lessons learned from my experience. Corporate injustice is not inevitable, but fighting it requires intelligence, patience, and strategic thinking. Sometimes the best revenge is not getting mad, but getting even in a way that demonstrates the true cost of treating talented people badly. I had proven that one person with the right skills and sufficient determination could bring down an entire company, not through sabotage or illegal activities, but through the careful application of market forces and competitive dynamics. The $5 price tag had been more than symbolic. It had been a demonstration that even the most valuable intelligence becomes worthless when it's not properly protected and respected. Meridian Dynamics had learned that lesson too late, but they had learned it thoroughly. And I had moved on to new projects, new challenges, and new opportunities, secure in the knowledge that justice had been served and competence had been vindicated. The revenge was complete, the lesson was learned, and the story had ended exactly as it should have, with the triumph of intelligence over incompetence and the vindication of merit over corporate politics. Sometimes the best revenge really is success, especially when that success comes at the expense of those who tried to suppress it.